Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to do the Maimer from exactly 40 years ago. The Rebbe said on this day, the 12th day of Sivan, that year was of course Shabbos. 12th day of Sivan is the final day of what we call Tashlumim. It's still connected to Shavuos being the festival of the Shosh Regolim, and on Pesach and Sukkot, since there are 7 days throughout the festival, people had an opportunity to bring the offerings in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. But on Shavuos, it's only a 1-day festival, times of the Torah, in Eretz Yisrael, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. So there were an extra, so that we should be able to have 7 days to bring the offerings. So the 12th day of Sivan is the final day. Sevarchu was Bnei Yisrael. So we read this in the Parshas Naso. Very famous, the blessing, the priestly blessing. We say it every morning after we say the blessing on Torah. So shall you bless the children of Israel. And then we have, of course, the blessings, and the final 2 blessings are Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom. So the final verse says, and may God, and I'm going to translate this literally, raise his face towards you. It means show grace and place upon you peace. So the sages have taught us, and we learned from this verse, and it's actually quoted in the Chassidic discourses, the Mamorim of our Rabbi, by the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah, and in the subsequent Mamorim al derech B'Drusha at Tzemach Tzedek v'Admor Marash. Similarly, in the Mamorim of the third Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the fourth Rebbe, the Rebbe Marash, the Gemara in Brachos tells us, Omru Malachei Shoros Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the angels of service say before God, Ksiv b'Torah asher lisaponim. It says in the Torah that you shouldn't do something inappropriate because God will not show grace. Again, yisaponim, the same word, lift up his face. Va'ata noisaponim liYisrael, and you do show grace to the children of Israel. T'chsiv yisa Hashem panav elecha. It says clearly, God will show grace to you. The face, by the way, is what expresses what one is feeling, so it shows the innermost. That's why, ironically, the word for face, which is the outside, is ponim, which means pinimi is the inside, because it's able to express what you're feeling. If somebody's happy, if somebody's angry, somebody is sad, somebody is mad, somebody is bewildered, whatever it may be. So, he says he won't show grace, and here he shows grace. So God answers the angels, shall I not show grace to Israel? I wrote for them in the Torah, and you will eat and be satiated, and you will bless the Lord your God. They are particular to with the amounts of what's called a kezayis, the amount of an olive, or a kibetza, the amount of an egg. There are various laws regarding eating that you have to bench after you eat a certain amount, etc. And after you eat a kezayis of something, after you eat the amount, the equivalent of an egg, which is usually sometimes it's volume, sometimes it's weight, an ounce, whatever it may be, but that's the amount that you need to make it after blessing, after you eat something. Menachem was the tzorch lahovin ma'u ha'inish v'shvil hadiktik shemshdaktik ma'al kezayis yesh nesiyas pon l'mayla. So in the Mamorim, they asked the obvious question: what's the connection here between the priestly blessing, where God says to show grace? The angels ask him, why are you showing grace? He says, because they're very particular. What are they particular about? The amounts, and to say the blessings for the food that they do. So there has to be a connection over here. That because they're particular about this having the amount of an olive, yesh nesiyas ponim l'mayla. God shows grace from the supernal realm. The crux of the explanation here is shabikas hamazon shel achri achila. the grace after meals, the blessing on the food, in Yonaham Shachas Gili Lakus Mamayla. Its whole purpose is to bring down the revelation of godliness from the supernal realm, which happens after the person who is here on this earth eats physical food specifically and does the physical act of eating, and because they are particular with the amounts and the appropriate amount for the appropriate blessing, therefore what is drawn forth through the blessing after food or for food is quite supernal. This is what it's about when God says God will show grace to you. As the Rebbe will explain, this will show the importance and of the physical and the material world, and what's so special about it. Base, and we could connect this, the whole idea of the advantage, what's so special about the physical realm, with the festival of Shavuos. Man Matan Torah said at the time when our Torah was given. Yud Beis Sivan who see him, you may have to shlum shalei, the 12th day of Sivan. Today is the final day of the ultimate completion. It completes the period when you're allowed to bring the festival, the offerings associated with the festival. The Hinen is by Le'il, the Rebbe says, explained earlier, the Shabbos Parshas Bamidbar, and the Maimer of Usfartim. We don't have that yet recorded, but we learned it on Shabbos a couple of weeks ago. Hadik B'drusha Rebbe said in Siyenu, the lesson that our Rabbeim taught when they deduced from the mitzvah of counting the Omer. And by the way, this the Rebbe says also in the Maimer, in the continuum of the Mamorim of 1948, 5708, the Naso of our generation. That's usually a reference to the Friedrich Rebbe, but I'd like to point out, and when we learned this on Shabbos, we pointed it out. It's also mentioned, this mimer was mentioned in the previous mimer, that's the last mimer that we did before Shabbos, Tzena Orena. Go out and see the mimer of and in there it's a mimer of both of them. It's for Shavuos, the Rebbe's mimer, and then the mimer in 5708. But I want to point out that the Rebbe says the mimer of Nasi Derenu. He doesn't mention here particularly his father-in-law, and the Rebbe is, of course, the Rebbe said many times that when he mentions the Nasi Derenu, he's one unit with his father-in-law. It happens to be that in 5708, when the mimer was published, the Rebbe himself wrote the commentary and the references and the notes on the Maimer, which is published there, plus the Rebbe prepared for publication the whole Maimer. So the Rebbe was very involved then too, and there is a certain amount of, I don't want to say ownership here, because I don't want to misuse words, etc., but there's something special about those discourses that the Rebbe prepared on the occasion of the special days, because the Friedrich Rebbe was not in a position to say Mamorim due to his health situation, and of course in consultation with his father-in-law and his Rebbe, he chose and prepared for publication a mimer that the previous Rebbe said previously, and he added his own notations to it. Anyway, okay, end square brackets here, parenthetically speaking. So, what does it say in the Maimer? Why does it say when the Torah was given? We've discussed this here in several Mamorim, and there are different angles and nuances that the Rebbe explains in each place. So, it's a famous question, but why, when God comes to the Jewish people and makes the great revelation at Sinai, and he wants to say his greatness and who he is, he says, I am the Lord your God. He should say, when I created heaven and earth. Instead, he says, I'm the Lord God who has taken you out of Egypt. So lama never matan Torah nechavel kachas tzicha menet Mitzrayim v'lo never asher baras Shemaim v'oretz. Haloi bria Shemaim v'oretz hu peli yes mitzias Mitzrayim. The creation of heaven and earth is a greater wonder than the exodus from Egypt. In other words, seemingly it's a greater accomplishment. It's interesting, yes. Sometimes the Mamorim say that in some of the explanation that to create heaven and earth, God made the rules. He made the material. It's ex nihilo, and for that, God is that's no biggie for him. It says, it's like in other Mamorim it explains, like when a human being speaks, so the words come out of your mouth. Somebody hears it, but it's nothing in comparison to your intellect and thought process and able to come up with ideas, etc. And that's how God created the world with words and utterances, etc. Whereas to change his own rules, that's something which is tough. You have to change the rules at the Exodus to make the water stand, etc. But that's not what the Rebbe says here. In the Maimer, it says both ways. There are different nuances. But here, seemingly, the way you would look at it in the first place, the greatest accomplishment is that God created heaven and earth. So when he gives the Torah, he should say, I'm the creator. But nevertheless, he says, I took you out of Egypt. So the Rebbe explains it a little more here. The miracles that happened in the Exodus of Egypt is something from something. It's just changing of the rules. So that's seemingly not the biggie. Creation of heaven and earth is ex nihilo, something out of nothing. As it's explained at length in the Tanya, the second part of Tanya, the gate of the unison of God and the belief in God, chapter 2, which we just learned, began it on Shavuos, after Shavuos. It's also brought in the Mamorim. So there it says that the creation of something out of nothing is a greater wonder than the splitting of the sea that happened at the Exodus from Egypt, especially according to that which is explained in the Holy Epistle in the fourth part of Tanya, in chapter 20. There it explains that when God made something out of nothing, where did God get this potential to do this from? This comes from the potential of the essence of who he is on his own, and that therefore gives him the power to create the highest realms, to create the world of Atzilus. And because God himself is not the effect, was not created by anyone else, it doesn't say it particularly here quoted, but the whole idea, people ask, children ask, who made God? Where did God come from? Where did he start? And God came from himself. That means that he created himself. Was he always there? That's not something that we could explain, but we say his existence is from himself. He's the constant, he's the continuous, he's the given. And it's that aspect within God that then allows him to create his true being, that he's always there. So, therefore, from this we understand that creation, something out of nothing, is quite a lofty thing, because it comes from that aspect of God, of something that we can't even fathom. We can't even think what that is, because everything else is an effect of some cause. Something created it. Whereas God was always there, is always there, and is not the effect. And from that power, he creates. So if so, God should have come to give us the Torah by saying the greatest thing of God, that he created the world, because he could. Nevertheless, it's still by the giving of the Torah, he says, I'm the one who took you out of Egypt. It's not the one who says, he didn't say, I'm the one who created heaven and earth. It's explained, famously, that the accomplishment of the giving of the Torah was the abolishment of the decree that the lower realm, the physical, could not be elevated to the supernal realm, and the supernal realm could not descend to the lower realm. So what happened was that the physical was able to be elevated to the supernal realm, and the holy and the spirituality was able to descend into this earth. So till then, there was no mixing. The world didn't have holiness, innate holiness. And from the time of the giving of the Torah, the world was able to be permeated with holiness, so that we had things that now maintain and retain their holiness, and the whole world can become holy by following the Torah. And we've discussed this in different respects, but let's see what the Rebbe says here. This also has to be understood. Since the spiritual is supernal and the physical is on the lower realm, why is it that way? Why did the spiritual have to come down, the physical have to go up? Let them stay. What's going on here? Because ultimately the physical has an advantage over the spiritual. But this was only revealed at the time of the giving of the Torah, and this had to come after the preparation, which was the exile in Egypt and the exodus from Egypt, as we will explain subsequently. And because of that importance, therefore the first commandment had to be that I am the Lord your God who was taking you out of Egypt, because that was part of the process to even get to this point of getting the Torah, of elevating and bringing out the goal of creation, the purpose of the creation, which is the physical becoming holy. We'll understand this more by what is explained in the Likutei Torah, the Hiniksiv. In Genesis, it tells us that Adam, the first human being, called names to each and every animal and the birds of the heaven. He called and drew down their names. Now, what are their names? Now, like we also learned, that everything that's created gets its energy through a combination of letters of the holy alphabet. The way they are combined, they make up the flow of energy that creates the object. So, for instance, a wolf is created with the three letters Zayin, Aleph, Beis, which spells Ze'ev, the name of wolf in the Holy Tongue. So, Adam drew this down by calling them these names. He saw the wolf, he said, this is Ze'ev. Mehahelem el Hagili, but he brought it out from what was concealed to the revealed. Because within them there was the revelation of life source and energy that came from the wind of the mouth of God, so to speak, the breath of the mouth. And as the Alter Rebbe explains there in his explanation of this, really we don't understand what this means, that Adam called them names. According to what it says in the second part of the Tanya, in the beginning of Shara Yichud V'Ha'amunah, in the portion of the daily study of Chumash Tehillim Tanya that is studied on the festival of Shavuos, in that day's portion it says, the name that everything is called, this is what we mentioned, is the combination of letters that gives it its life energy, which is drawn forth within the 10 utterances. And there it explains there, if you remember the Tanya, he says, even though, for instance, it doesn't say Yehi Eben, there should be a stone, but a stone gets its life energy from the letter Aleph, Beis, Nun, which spells Even, stone, etc. As you see there. If so, these names were there before even the person was created. The animals were created first. So what does it mean that Adam called him the names. He didn't invent the names. So he explains. So of course they were there, the combinations were there, that flow of energy was there, and he was able to call their names and draw forth from the concealed to the revealed. So then what was the big deal? We have to understand what was the great accomplishment that through revealing what these names are, that he should physically call them these names in the physical world. It was there already. What do you have to reveal this, what was concealed? The Rebbe explains further there in that Maimer in Likutei Torah. It says in Deuteronomy that not on bread alone does a person live, is a person sustained, but on what comes forth from the mouth of God a person lives. The words of God that made the food exist are the combination of letters that came forth from the name of God, and then it's this that sustains the person. That's what gives the person life. And like the Arizal explains in this verse, why should the person need the energy of God that sustains and creates the bread, the food that he's eating? He already has the word of God and the combination of letters that sustains him, that created the person in the first place. So why should he need another set of the combination of letters to go through this energy? Other Mamorim have asked this also in a different way, and they explain that we would think that every part of creation, mineral, vegetable, animal, and human, should have to be sustained by something at least as equally strong as them, and not something lower. So for instance, the vegetable is sustained by mineral, by soil, and the minerals in the ground, and the animals who eat the vegetable, the vegetation, and the human who eats the animal, or animals, whatever it may be. I don't want to get too gory here. We don't need cannibalism to survive. No, it's a serious question for the explanation. Just another thing parenthetically here, and it's also explained elsewhere in Chassidus. It says that Moses, when he was on Mount Sinai, he says he didn't eat. He says lechem le'achalti, he didn't eat bread and he didn't drink water. So what did he live on? A person can't survive like that. So there was a miracle. It happened 3 times, this miracle. But it's explained that he was able to take this code straight out of the code for the bread and get that into his encoding process. So these tzirufei oasis, that's what explains Kabbalistically how Moshe Rabbeinu was able to be sustained. Don't try this trick at home. So going back to, but the Arizal here says something a little, he explains a little bit more of this, how this works. And he says, so he asks, why is it that a person should need the energy from the bread? In other words, the word of God and the bread. A person is born, they haven't eaten yet. It doesn't matter. In other words, why should, and even if the process is to eat the bread, but you have the word of God that sustains you, why is it the word of God necessary that's sustaining the bread, and that's going to sustain you, this word of God? But here's the thing. Whatever is lower down is rooted higher up. So the word of God, which is in the bread, is a higher word of God than the word of God that makes the human being. Whatever is higher comes down here lower. And we're going to see this here even more. Again, let me, if I didn't say it till now, but we're using the version of the Maimer in Teres Menachem Sefer Mamorim Moedim Shavuos, which is the newer put together version, but it's of course the same Maimer that you'll find in the Hisfaduyos, the Sefer Mamorim, etc. And you have it here on your screen. So the Arizal continues that everything that is higher than it was, the lower it falls. But the lower it goes down, the lower it descends. And now the Arizal continues, it doesn't only descend, it falls. In a place where it can't descend, it falls down. Falling down is even lower than the greatest descension. And this illustrates that it came from a higher place because it ended up lower. And as the Alter Rebbe explains further, this is the idea of the energy and the light of the world of Tohu, the world of chaos, that precedes the world of organization, the world of Tikkun, the world of Tohu. Just in a nutshell, ironically, is that there's so much energy. God creates the world that way first, but the energy can't be contained, and therefore it's only explosive, and it can't be contained at all. And then God creates the vessels that could contain it, but then He has to break down this energy, and it's in a whole different way. So the energy of Tohu is not sustainable because it can't be contained. And therefore, there's what's called Shviras HaKelim. Even anything that tries to contain it is broken, explodes, and sparks fly from that. And the original creation, that's the idea of the sparks that we can now rectify and refine and gather up. So, nevertheless, there is an advantage in these energy of Tohu. So, what fell down is so this is the light and the energy of Tohu that fell down through when those vessels broke, that couldn't contain it, that exploded, so to speak. Like it says in the Medrash, God was creating worlds and destroying them. This falling is a great big fall. To the extent, like the Zohar puts it, that whichever one that falls from its level is called, etc. The Rebbe doesn't enumerate it here, but so therefore, but if you look there in the Zohar, it says the thing that's the opposite of life. So we'll take it one step further. The Rebbe doesn't even say that here. He just says, etc. Nevertheless, there are the sparks that were refined on their own when the world was created in the organized way, the world of Tikkun as we know it. The same Medrash that speaks about the worlds being created and destroyed, then it says Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Voiker, so it says that there was a plan to be something, not that it should be, it was already there. And then it says Vihine Toiv Ma'oid, and behold, the world is very good. So what do you mean, and behold? Because then God sees it and it strikes him. He says so. This one was pleasing to him, because this is the one that was sustainable, this world of Tikkun. So that with the creation of the world of organization of Tikkun, that already corrected and fixed, organized the destruction of the chaotic world of Tohu. Nevertheless, there were still some sparks that flew that weren't fixed up, and therefore they did fall down in a very low place in the world of Tikkun. From this we understand that their root in the supernal realms is higher than everything else. And therefore, therefore now we understand that the word of God that sustains the bread, it comes from a higher place than the word of God that sustains the person, that's originally from the world of Tikkun. And in the world of Tikkun, since it's lower down, since the bread is lower, its energy is from a higher spot. And since its root is so much higher, therefore, specifically, it has in its ability to sustain the human being. Therefore, these sparks, so to speak, they add something special within the person who eats them, and the food actually becomes blood and flesh like the person themselves. In order for the person to be able to elevate these sparks within the food, there has to be a special capability that God gives from the supernal realm in order for this process to work. That is the blessing that we bless before and after the eating. The word for blessing comes from the same nuance as the idea of drawing forth, drawing down. So when we make a bracha, we're drawing. When you bless somebody, you're drawing energy to them, and it comes also from elsewhere. It's explained. We use a similar word to what we do to a vine when we put it under and back in the ground, and it comes out. It's called hamavrich. It's the same word because it's drawing more energy. Now from this, in this process in and of itself, when we make the blessing before we eat, before the eating, that's to draw down energy from the supernal realm in a way of the supernal awakening, so that there should be the ability of the lower awakening, evoke what we can do, halos, and it says uplifting these sparks through the eating to the boy like it should be done. The blessing which is after the eating, that's to draw down the supernal awakening which is coming after the input of the lower awakening of our part, what we do, then we draw down something even higher. Through this we get the complete the complete refinement of this food. Then the food then becomes included in godliness. You've elevated it. Because it's the idea of refining those sparks of the world of Tayu, that chaotic world. After they are included then in godliness, they have already been elevated and higher than from the place where they were refined, the world of Tikkun. We did it, but they got elevated to some place much higher than the world. So now we understand how what God answered those angels. So I shouldn't show grace to Israel. They're particular with these amounts, the amount of the olive, the amount of the egg. Now the law is that if you eat something, to make a bracha before you eat, it doesn't matter how much you eat. No matter what, even if you taste a tiny bit, you already have to make a blessing. Parshas. Because this is the idea of the supernal awakening which comes before our part, the lower awakening. That's not dependent on what we're going to do in how we can refine the physical and the material world through eating for the proper purpose. And therefore it doesn't matter how much one is going to eat, because this is the impetus. The supernal awakening doesn't make a difference how much. Even if you eat a drop, you already have to make a bracha. But then, in order to do what you have to do, there's an amount. But the after blessing is to bring about the supernal awakening that follows the input of us in the lower realm. It's dependent on what we do here, those on the lower realm, this world. Therefore it has an amount. You have to eat, and therefore the sages teach us to eat means an amount that's enough to satiate for savota, like it says in the Torah, and then you can make the blessing afterwards. That's the kazayis, etc. So through this, that Israel is particular on themselves. This is also the idea of beautifying the mitzvah in physical things. We draw down very lofty, 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 very l energy and light. May God graces us from His innermost to you. This raising the face from the supernal realm, this grace that God shows us. And this is the idea of He will place upon you peace. That's the idea of the bond and the connection of two opposites. Like it explains in Tanya when it says God who makes peace in His supernal realms. Amongst the angels and the officers in the supernal realms. The peace is brought through drawing down a light which is even higher than these dueling forces of angels. Just like in a physical kingdom, the officers, when they're in the presence of the king, they're all submissive and subservient. Their existence is nothing. Everyone in the presence of the king, they're nothing. But this submission and subservience then is drawn forth in each one when they get to their task afterwards. For this they're called officers. Their mission was to affect how things are run in the nation. And there are also peace made amongst them. So, just to take a tangent for a moment, there was a video that Rebbe released a couple of weeks ago of a talk that he gave to the women, and in the middle there was a little bit of an emergency there, and somebody actually had fainted or something. They had to get a medical attention. And you see Rabbi Chassidic, who was the Rebbe's, let's say, highest officer, he stands through this ordeal like nothing's going on, because there he's not, the Rebbe was present, so the Rebbe was already, asking if there's a doctor, if not a doctor. The Rebbe himself was dealing with it. But when he goes back to his place, he was running the show. This is something maybe more for Chassidic than a shir, but nevertheless, it's a lot could be said about this idea. So ultimately, this all draws down, and that's what is brought about through the ultimate of this refinement that we're talking about in this process of eating and bringing godliness into the world and elevating, is that we draw it down from a place which is higher than the world of Tohu and the world of Tikkun together, from this highest energy of God. Just like it is like this way with the idea of eating. So the Rebbe says it's not just only about eating and about that part of elevating the world, but everything that we do in the whole world. In creation, that's what it says when God created the world. When we finish the world, we say it in Kiddush every Friday night, quoting from Parshas, that God made the world to do things, that He gave us our piece to do, to rectify and to fix. The ultimate of creation is for the service that Israel serves God in rectifying the world, in tikkun olam. And it says the Toyu, but this tikkun olam means through rectifying, through clarifying and refining the sparks of Toyu, of that world that fell. So how did this happen in the big picture? It was done by the first thing that we as a people experienced was the exile in Egypt. That was the idea of the crucible for iron. Iron, in order for it to get refined, goes through the crucible and the dross gets burnt off, and then the pure metal comes out. The word kur has the same letters as crucible, right? At least two of the letters. It refined Israel through the toughness of the slavery, with the hard work and the labor. First, when they went into exile in Egypt, that was just plain. It was just plain Egypt that had its limitations and boundaries. As long as Joseph and his brothers were alive, the slavery did not begin. A new king, afterwards it says, and a new king rose over Egypt that did not know Joseph. And that's when the real bondage and slavery began, to the harsh conditions of slavery in hard labor. This was the preparation for the exodus from Egypt, and the refinement of the physicality at the time of the giving of the Torah shows. That's when we got the fusion of the supernal and the lower realms. Like God says, I'm the one who will begin. Like it says when giving the Torah, and God says, and God went down onto Mount Sinai. And it says the Teu the elevation of the sparks of Tohu that are in the physical, that should be able to be included in the godliness, even in a way that's higher than the world of Tikkun. This is the peace that was accomplished in the giving of the Torah. It wasn't just peace in the supernal realm. Elagam, Shalom Amata, was also peace in the lowest. Ben Gashmis, Veruchni is peace between the physical and the spiritual. It's one thing. Shehu in Yichibur Hafchin, it's the idea of the opposite, the combining the opposites. Therefore it says, I am the Lord your God who's taken you out of Egypt. And it doesn't say that I created heaven and earth. Oh, so this is why this is the bigger accomplishment. The creation of heaven and earth, like it says in the first Rashi in Chumash, was for the purpose of Israel and for the purpose of the Torah. But the ultimate of the giving of the Torah was to elevate the physical, to bring about the true intent of how this world will work. That the lower realms should be able to be elevated to the supernal. That affected the raising and the lifting and the elevation of Israel and the Torah, that for them the world was created. To the extent that the exodus from Egypt was an exodus from all boundaries and limitations. And like it says in Micah, that like the days of the exodus of Egypt, etc., meaning that God will show us wonders in the world to come. And here the Rebbe drives it home. And where does this have to do with dollars and cents in our own life? Just like after the exile and the bondage in Egypt, they merited afterwards a great wealth, a great bounty. When God told Abraham about what's going to happen, he says, and they are going to make them slaves, and they will afflict them, and afterwards they will go out with a great wealth. The Talmud tells us they were ready to say, let us go, forget, that part, and God, about that you're going to give us the riches, let us go. And God said, I promised Abraham that you're going to go out with wealth. You got to make sure you get that too. They're ready to go, so at least it should abolish the bondage and the slavery and the affliction that they were afflicted. But from that, nevertheless, they stayed in Egypt. So that also shows us how important it was to go through the whole process, even having additional slaveries, in order to get this great rechush, this wealth. The Rebbe says that's how it is right now, today. Through the general serving God in the time of exile now, we will merit to have a great wealth in the future to come. And specifically and especially through serving God in the heels of Golus, in these last final days of Golus, in the heels of the Mashiach. The main thing is not to be affected and not to be embarrassed by those that scoff at you, make fun of you, and the time of the Talmud, it was popular to be to do what's right and to follow God. So it wasn't such a big thing to be concerned about not worrying about the scoffers in serving God. But at the time of exile, that became a main thing. And by the way, just in this Farbrengen, the Rebbe was talking about also there were people who were critical of programs of the Rebbe, of the Rambam study and Sivan Rambam and everything. The Rebbe was talking about saying, we don't even look in that direction. Just do what you're supposed to do and move on. But the Rebbe was also talking about it. We learned this in the last Maimer too, and other Maimorim at this time, that we have to never be affected by people who are just critical or making fun or whatever it is. Do what you got to do. The Ashleimar, like Menachem says, you can take it to the bank. This is the whole idea that the Rebbe said, that it brings that medrash that God says, I'm giving the blessing because they are particular. This is the idea of not being embarrassed and affected by those who make fun and laugh and scoff. In the Code of Jewish Law, in the Shulchan Aruch, it says right there at the beginning that you should not be embarrassed or ashamed from the scoffers and affected. But it's brought in the note of the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Ishlis, who wrote the Haggadah, right, as famously well known, the Code of Jewish Law is written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, who also brings primarily the Sephardic custom, and the Ashkenazi custom is added in by Rabbi Moshe Ishlis, and there's one Shulchan Aruch for everybody. So the Rebbe says that it's in his notation. So therefore, it's Einichi of Minatoid. It's not a regular one of the 613 mitzvahs. This is just a guide by which you could do everything. V'gam teichen in Yonei Einikim mitzvahs say mitzvahs. It's not even just something like a positive command or a negative command. The mitzvahs say what you should do, what you shouldn't do. This is how to do. Therefore, it's something which is in the lower realm that Israel accepted upon themselves to be exceedingly scrupulous and careful and particular. By days, through this, that they're not embarrassed from those that scoff. Listen what the Rebbe says here. We affect that even those who scoff and those who make fun, they will join. They will already be refined themselves. This is what the Rebbe says. Just move forward. Don't engage. Like it says, the verse that all the nations of the earth will see that the name of God is called upon you, and they will fear you. Even though the sages tell us that this verse is referring to the head tefillin, so that's what this is about. It says the name of God upon you. Famously, the Rebbe had the tefillin campaign, and he spoke about this. But nevertheless, the Rebbe says, the Talmud tells us the whole Torah is compared to tefillin. So therefore, every mitzvah you have this effect. So if you're not affected by people scoffing, they will join. We'll transform them. And the Rebbe brought this in the previous Maimer also, and it was in the same time, same period, that the kings will be your nannies and babysitters, and their officers will be your wet nurses. This already happens in the time of Golus. And now we'll finish up here. That will have the ultimate of blessing. That's the idea of the priestly blessing. God says, so you shall bless. Like the Maimer says, Meharamaz. That from the name of the Sohar, that Shamilas Tevorchu, the word Tevorchu, so you shall bless, the word Tevorchu in the Holy Tongue, Betziruf Bekisrei. It's in the same, if you rearrange the letters, it says Bekisrei, in his crown. That alludes to the fact that the light issues forth from the crown, from the highest part. From the attribute, the characteristic of Keser, which is, like we explained many times, this is the first part of when God begins the chain of creation, the highest level of godliness that is effective within creation. And subsequent to that, God will bless you and keep you. That there is the power from the supernal awakening, so that what we do over here, we evoke here with the lower awakening, should be with blessing and success. Then God will illuminate with His grace to you. That's the idea of them bringing forth the male part, the male water, which comes forth after the evoking done through the female, so to speak, the world and God being male and female, and what's evoked from the input of the lower realm. That brings about the ultimate refinement of this world. And then God again shows grace. That means after the fusion of the male and the female, meaning the supernal and the lower realms, the higher and the lower. They are both uplifted and raised to a level which is higher than both of them. And therefore it says, and I will place peace upon you, that the vessel that holds blessing, to receive the supernal blessing which is higher than the chain of creation, is the idea of peace. And then he finishes, and I will place my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. The Talmud has a discussion. Is this what does that refer to? The blessing straight that God blesses Israel, or or that God blesses the Kohanim that they should bless Israel, or that blesses the Kohanim, they're included in the blessing of Israel. It's a discussion. That includes all of Israel, which includes also Kohanim. Everybody is Kohanim, like it says, and you shall be for me a kingdom of Kohanim, of priests, and a holy people, a holy nation. The blessing of God issues forth in all the matters, in children and sustenance, and in children and health and sustenance, in an abundant fashion, for family and good health and all good things, till the primary blessing, the blessing of the true full redemption, which will be through David, the king of Mashiach, which is connected to our teacher Moshe Rabbeinu. The first Redeemer is the final Redeemer. V'gam al Baal Shem Tov, and it's also a reference to the Baal Shem Tov, and that's what the Rebbe says over here. Through spreading his wellsprings to the furthest realms, to the outside of Efrat, and especially in a way, like it says, that it's increased and people are able to study and be sustained from it. And this is done through the Chabad way and order of Chassidus, the way it's been organized and brought down in Chochmah bin Adas through our Rabbeim. It has the explanations in the Torah and the wellsprings of the Baal Shem Tov, and then the Rebbe says, and not just an explanation, but the addition of new things, to some new things that are not even, it's not even relative. So much has been given to us. Then the master will come, the King Moshiach. And through occupying ourselves with spreading this wellsprings to the furthest realms and the furthest reaches in the outside. Yet in the time of Golus, we get to the uplifting of the head, the uplifting of the head, like it says, that's how it says to count. Not only does not only pick up the foot and the body, the head. Like it says, God will lift his face to show grace. That's lifting up everything higher than the lower realms, the upper realms and the lower realms. And even though this verse that says uplift the head says regarding the tribe of Levi, all of Israel is connected, is and it's pertinent to the work of the Shevet Levi, Kipsaka Rambam, like the Rambam rules, Shalei, Shevet Levi Levad, Elakomi, Kol Ish Fish, the Rambam says, in the end of the laws of Shemitah and Yovel, that not just Shevet Levi is sanctified, but anybody who wants to and chooses to is also can be devoted to God. So every single person whose spirit avails him and wants to give. Then we come to this coming week's Parsha, when you will uplift the lights, when you will uplift them. And seen until in the way that we'll be able to see the Kohen in Zion. And like it says in Order 66, that's a blessing that has been popularized. You will see Aaron the priest kindling the menorah in the third Beis Hamikdash, in the third holy temple. This revelation will happen not just to the children of Israel, through our youth and our elders and our sons and our daughters, but in the whole world, and everyone will be part. This is the purpose of the candelabra of the menorah and the holy temple. That from there, light goes out to the whole world. Till we get the fulfillment of the promise. Be revealed to God in Zion. And that was also the Rebbe's chapter of Tehillim that year. It's in chapter 84. In a way that we will be transported there in the clouds of the heaven. Like it says in the Gemara, explaining the verse in Daniel. Speedily in our days, actually, so in our redemption, with happiness and gladness of heart. Chaim.